morning and welcome to our Brunch and Learn on Demystifying GA4. I hope you're all well this morning. The sun is shining here in Kent, which is a real change from the last few days. It's felt like winter was here. So I hope the sun's shining with you, and if not, we'll send it your way, hopefully. I'm Becky. I'm founder and CEO here at Reflect Digital, and we're a performance marketing agency, and we're here to unleash your potential. And today we're going to help you do that by understanding data better, because it has been a bit of a tricky time, hasn't it? GA4 has just kind of been pushed on all of us, and we don't quite know how to use it. And it's tricky when you're then still needing to produce data reports and you're feeling a bit lost. So today is about giving you a bit of a reset and really helping to show you how you can use GA4. So hopefully, if you were lucky enough to get a brunch box, and I say that because honestly, this has been the biggest demand we've ever had for one of these sessions. So not everyone has one, but if you were lucky enough to get your name down, hopefully you've received it. And a massive thank you to Erin and Lucy for getting those out. We want today to be interactive, so there will be a Q&A session at the end of Ed's talk. So please pop any questions in the chat and they'll magically come to me. We have had a lot of questions already, so any that we don't get a chance to answer, we will be following up and answering for you. So don't worry. And there also are some questions that are probably a bit more specific that might be easier to answer offline anyway. You need to be on muted standard view for the best experience today. So if you can just check that out in your Zoom setup, and that will give you the best experience for being able to see everything. So we are joined by our fantastic Ed Cox. Now, Ed is our data and CRO lead here at Reflect Digital, and I don't know what we'd do without him, but don't tell him that. So he's worked in online media since 2008, which when you see him, you'll be like, I don't know, I can't believe that. So he's experienced a huge amount of change in that time. We all know we've had a lot of change happening over the years, and often this change happens without us choosing it. So he is very well versed in understanding that. He's worked on some of the biggest global clients, and more recently he's been helping them to move from Universal Analytics to GA4. So he really knows what he's talking about. He's got his Google Analytics certification, which puts him in a really good position today to help us to recalibrate your web analytics and to embrace GA4 and what it has to offer, because actually it's not as bad as we might think. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to hand you over to Ed. Ed, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Becky. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our Brunch and Learn Demystifying GA4. I think that the amount of interest we've had in this is testament to the fact that you are very much not alone in your confusion with GA4. It wasn't terribly well signposted by Google, and Google being Google, they do like to hide a lot of the most crucial facts from you. But hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be a bit more confident in navigating the reports within GA4 and getting to the sort of answers of the questions that you have. So the purpose of the session is sort of threefold. We'll be going over the default reports that you find within GA4. For many of you, that might actually be sufficient. But for those of you who want that sort of customized touch, we'll be looking at the Explore tab and how to build custom reports, which is a criminally underused function within GA4. So hopefully you'll become more confident in using that. And then we'll briefly touch on sort of presentation options, so how to present the data once you've got it out of GA4. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have be a lot more confident in using GA4 and what the various reports are telling you, and what some of the dimensions and metrics mean. So one of the most common questions I get asked is, what's the difference between GA4 and Universal Analytics? And you hear a lot about session-based versus event-based, and that's not really that clear. It's not very intuitive what that means. So trying to boil it down, Universal Analytics was what they call session-based. So essentially, what they were interested in was visitors to your website. So a user would start a session, they might do a couple of actions on your website, and then for whatever reason, they'll end that session. Either they'll close the browser window or they'll be dormant for 30 minutes or more. And then they can come back to your website and start a second session and perform some more actions, maybe purchase. The problem with that is those two sessions would never talk to one another. So what you have is two separate sessions, and never the twain shall meet, as it were. So you wouldn't be able to relate the previous session's actions back to the actual purchase. And that loses a lot of the context because they could have been doing some quite important contextual stuff in the first session. So Google Analytics moved away from that, and it's more events focused now. So essentially you have a user and they may interact with any of your properties. So that might be a web page or an app if you have a mobile app. And what will happen is any event that that user takes will be linked back to that user, not to a session. So you have that full context of everything that that user has done on your site. So that's in a nutshell what the difference is. What Google Analytics allows for, or GA4 allows for now, is a lot more customization in the events. They're very much now focused on particular events, because I think what they recognized was not all businesses care about the same metrics. So the ability now for businesses to create their own custom events to what is important to them is kind of the basis, very much the basis of Google Analytics 4. So we'll move on to the default reports that are found within GA4. And there are a fair few of them, and they cover a wide variety of flavors. So you have the acquisition reports. Now, these, broadly speaking, answer the question, where are my users coming from? How did they find us? And then you have the engagement reports, and that is, what are they doing once they're on my site? What actions are they taking? We have user attribute reports, which covers things like, who are these people that are coming to my site? What do they look like? What's my audience? We have the monetization reports. That's how are we converting them from visitors to paying customers? What does that journey look like? We have retention reports, which is how long are we keeping them once we've got them? How sticky is our website? And then tech, which is kind of what devices are people using to visit my website. So those are the kind of 6 broad pillars of the reports. And obviously there are different reports under each of those headings, which we will go through now. So the acquisition reports, broadly speaking, we have user acquisition, traffic acquisition, and user acquisition cohorts. Now, I don't think user acquisition is particularly well named. I would have called it new user acquisition. So there was a question, and it's a very common question, what's the difference between user acquisition and traffic acquisition reports? Well, the answer to that is user acquisition reports are how somebody found you for the first time. So the first time they visit the site. So what you're looking at is new users, brand new users, and how they found you. The traffic acquisition report is any traffic. So it's just the last time they found you. So that's a mix of brand new customers and returning customers. The user acquisition cohorts reports are more about splitting your audience by sort of specific timeframes, for example. So how people behave on your website over time. So it's more a kind of how people who found us in April, how do they differ from people who found us in September? What are they doing differently? So on. The engagement reports, so they come in, again, a number of flavors, and there are a few questions that we got in advance that might be answered here. So the events report focuses on sort of specific actions on your website. So what are people doing once they're on the site? The pages and screens it focuses kind of on page-related metrics. So number of page views, what used to be called dwell time. It's not called that anymore. We'll touch on that a bit later. So time spent on sites and user journeys through your site. The landing page report focuses very much specifically on the page that people are landing on when they visit your site. So that's really interesting, particularly for paid media campaigns. So is that page optimized? Is it sticky? Are people staying around? Does it have the content on it that people are expecting? So that's often a metric used when you're looking at SEO, for example. It's how relevant is that page to the user's search term? Is it what they were expecting to find? So you'll see things like bounce rates and conversion rates and time spent on page. And that kind of gives you an idea of the quality of traffic that's being driven. So we'll move on to monetization reports. So this is how are we converting our users to paying customers? So the e-commerce purchases report it's kind of a granular breakdown of the transactions that are taking place. So that might be things like product name, revenue, quantities purchased, and so on. So it'll give you a really good idea of what's being bought and how much money it's producing. The purchase journey is around the complete journey from landing on your website to making a purchase. So it's what pages the users are visiting to inform their purchase, and how they're converting. The difference between that and the checkout journey is very much a zoomed in version of the purchase journey. It's very much on your checkout process. So this is a really useful report to use if you see a lot of abandoned baskets or a lot of drop-offs during the checkout process. You can start to look at what page are people dropping off and start to examine why that might be. The promotions report is, some of you may see this, some may not. I think it's dependent on whether or not you've actually run any promotions and have that set up as a metric. So it's how well promotions and coupons are performing. So if you have promotional material, maybe promo codes in emails and things, this is a really good report to use to see how well those are converting. So it helps you to split those out from just the general purchases on your site. And then the retention report. So this is how well are you keeping the users once they're on your site? How sticky is the website? Is how I like to think of it. So you can identify churn rates. So what percentage of your visitors are visiting just the once and then disappearing. You can help to sort of optimize channel acquisition channels. So looking at what the quality of your what traffic is through different channels. It can show you the user behavior over time. So you'll have last 1 day, 7 days, and 30 days, I think, by default. So you can see how 30-day-old users are behaving differently from 1-day-old users, for example. And you can also look at things like lifetime value, which is very important, particularly for e-com brands. So, what's the total revenue over the lifetime of them being a customer? We did have a question that was pre-submitted. How can you customize GA4 for online retail reporting? I think the answer to that question is it already is very much. And I think you'll find a lot of non-e-com brands saying, well, wait a minute, it is completely e-com focused and I can't make it non-e-com focused. There's a lot you can do with GA4. There's a lot of customization that you can do, but by default, you will have things like purchase events and revenue and item ID and item name and so forth. So it is very much already geared up towards online retail reporting, and that's where your sort of monetization section of GA4 comes in really handy. We'll go into a little more of that a bit later, but yeah, I think that's sort of the vibe of GA4, is it was very much kind of e-commerce focused. Under the user section, so this is more about who is coming to the site, so it's understanding your audiences. So you'll have things like demographic details. These cover country, location, gender, interests, age, language. It's really important to understand that for this, it's really important to have Google Signals enabled on the GA4 property. Now, it is in your settings section of your GA4. So it's really important to have that enabled. That gives you the depth of the demographic breakdown. If you don't have that enabled, you will only see 2 or 3 of these dimensions. So if you want to really understand your audience, make sure Google Signals is enabled in your property. And then tech. So this is very much sort of focused on what tech people are using to get to the site. So that's very interesting in terms of particularly if you've got a web, obviously a website and a mobile app. What's the split? If you don't have a web app, a mobile app, you don't have a desktop app, is it optimized to mobile? And so you can sort of start to see details related to the sort of tech that people are using, even down to browsers that they're using and operating systems and so on. So it's very much a kind of more technical part, but there's still a lot of interesting stuff in there to have a look at. As with any of these sections, I would really recommend just having a look at the overview tab initially, just to give you a flavor of what's available. And then you can start to sort of drill down a little more into, well, actually, I'm really interested in that. So maybe create a custom report for that particular thing. So once you've picked the default report, there are a number of controls that there's a lot more flexibility, I think, than people give it credit for. So initially you have the comparisons. You can add comparisons. So if you want to, for example, compare your paid traffic versus your organic traffic, or maybe you want to compare your web traffic to your mobile traffic, this is where you can add those comparisons. So you can create comparisons. I think you can apply about 5. I think it's 5 maximum of the time. And that just charts those against one another, so you can directly compare whatever metric you're looking at. There's also a filter option. So if you wanted to filter out some data, you're not interested in certain data, you can do that. Commonly, for example, you may see traffic that is like not set or unassigned or something, and you don't want that because it's skewing the charts, for example. You can filter that out, and this is where you would do that. So it follows standard logic, sort of, exactly matches, contains, does not contain regular expressions, and so on. The control button functions, which you'll find in the top right, I believe, are, some of them are self-explanatory, some of them really are not. So obviously the date is the date range that you're looking at for your data. It also includes the capacity to add a comparison date range. So you can either do the previous like-for-like period. So you might want to compare September this year to September last year. Or just the previous months. You might want to compare September to August. So that's where you can do that. There's a little toggle at the bottom of this drop down, and that's where you switch that on. So you can compare two dates if you're doing year-on-year comparisons. The 2 bars, that's the comparison audiences. So that's very much similar to what we just mentioned. There's just 2 places to do it. You can edit them by clicking that button. Now this button's called the export button, which is a bit misleading. It doesn't export to Excel and Google Docs and things like that as you might expect. What it does is it exports it to the Explore tab within GA4, which we'll cover shortly. So it's a slightly misleading name. If you wanted to export the data to Excel or Google Sheets, that's this little chap here, the Share Report button. You can also share the report with anybody that's got access to your Google property. So you must have access in order to access a shared report. New to GA4 is the Google AI Insights, and you'll see this dotted around GA4 in different views. It's pretty basic in comparison to a lot of AI tools that are available, but it's a really useful thing to get quick answers to questions that you might be asked and you've not got time to pull reports or try to make a custom visualization. So just click on that and literally just type in. It might be something as simple as what's our visitor pattern over the week? What's the most popular day of the week? GA will, the AI within GA4 will be able to tell you that answer almost immediately. So it's really good for thought starters. It's really good for getting quick answers to questions. If you have admin access, you'll see a little pencil icon, and this is the customization. So you can customize any page within the default reports and create your own cards, for example. It's a little bit outside of the scope of this session, but it's worth playing around with if you want to create your own sort of custom dashboards within GA4. It allows you to play with the different cards and different dimensions and metrics that those cards show. So if you have that appears in your view, highly recommend having a look and a play around in there. So here's an example of a table. So it's there's a lot more customization you can actually do once you've got the table up as well. First one is the search bar. So this would be useful, for example, if you just wanted to look at paid media or just organic media, for example. So if you just type paid into the search bar, what it will do is it will filter out anything that's not paid. And as a bonus, the totals across the top are dynamic, so they will change just to display your paid totals, not the total. If that makes sense. So if you just want a quick answer to a question, that's a great way of doing that. You can change the primary dimension by clicking the little down chevron under the title. So what appears in that drop down will depend on the report you're in. So I always say if you can't find the dimension that you're after, you're probably in the wrong report. So you'll need to have a think about what report you need to be in order to see the dimension that you want to see in that drop down. There's a capability to add secondary dimensions by clicking the plus button. An example of that is there. So here I've added device category to this. So now you have first user primary channel group broken down by device. So that's the secondary dimension. And then anywhere that you see a chevron in the under the column name, that you can also choose what's displayed there. So in this example, we've got key events and it's showing all events. If you just wanted to see a purchase event or another key event that you happen to have set up, you can click the down chevron and then select which one you want to see. So there's certain customization you can do within these reports. Now, interestingly, in the last week or so, which is always the way, just as you finalize a presentation, everything changes. GA4 or Google have released a couple of new features. They are not available everywhere. They're doing Google things. Google always do. They're rolling things out slowly. I haven't been able to find them in every property I've looked in, but I am assured they're coming, and they are of particular interest. So the first one is toggles and totals. It's been strangely difficult to get just a total, say, total visitors chart within GA4 without it breaking it down into by channel or by user, for example. They have introduced that now, and the ability to toggle on and off certain dimension values. So in this case, you can choose which of the channels you want to see, or you can turn them all off and just see the total, and that's reflected in the chart above. So once you start seeing those, you can start playing with that, and it's just an added level of customization and kind of gets around that strangely difficult task of just finding a total number in GA4. And secondly, and probably more interesting, is the industry benchmarking. Now, this is quite a big one. One of the things that GA4 has always been open to criticism is there's no kind of industry benchmarking. It's how is my shop in this industry comparing to others? It's coming. So once you start to see this little medal icon at the top of your reports cards, you'll know that it's been enabled on your property. So once you do see that, give it a click, hit the toggle so benchmarking is turned on, and then really importantly, ensure that the peer group is set to a relevant peer group for your business. So in this case, I think this example is the Google merch store, which sells a lot of clothing, apparel. So their benchmarking peer group is apparel. Also critical to getting this is ensuring that the model contributions and business insights is enabled in your settings. So this is within your account details section of your settings. So just make sure that that's ticked in readiness for the launch of this. So we're going to move on to custom reports now. So this is where you can get a bit more creative and a bit more specific. And I think it's as I said before, it's a bit of an unused section. So when you click on the Explore tab in Google Analytics, if reports have been created already, you will see them populated in a list. Now, the key thing to remember is it will save anything you've created, whether you rename it or not. So if you have a lot of untitled explorations, it's a bit difficult to kind of work out if someone's already created the visualization that you're looking to create. So there can be a lot of duplication of work. So I strongly suggest that you rename every report that you create by what it is, give it a nice clear title. We don't want to see lots of untitled explorations. Do not displease the kitty. So there are a number of sort of preset templates within Explore, and they sort of do different things. And I'll explain why it's probably better to avoid them initially. So the first one is freeform. So that's just a freeform kind of bit of a sandbox. It will default to a table, but you have chart options as well. You have the path template, which will show you the journeys users take through your website. And you can do that from either a landing page forwards, so you can see what pages users visit after they've hit the landing page, or you can work backwards, which is really useful. So if you want to start at a purchase event and then work backwards to see where they came from, what actions did they take, or what pages did they visit. Cohort analysis is really good for looking at user retention over time and user behavior over time. The funnel is a really good report to look at if you're looking at sort of abandonment rates in your checkout journey. See if you can smooth out some of the friction within your checkout journey or throughout the site. These are fully customizable, so you can set up your own funnels as as is relevant to your business. The overlap charts will look at things such as how much of my audience uses desktop, how much uses mobile, and what's the overlap. And then user lifetime. So this is things like average lifetime value of customers, for example. So you can have a look at what kind of spits out when you choose those. The reason I always recommend using a blank template is selecting any of those predefined templates. It also pre-populates the dimensions and metrics, and a lot of the time they aren't the dimension of metrics you're interested in. So then you have to spend all the time deleting them from the chart. So I would always recommend starting with a blank, because you can then overlay these templates later on once you've decided what you want to look at. So once you click blank template, you'll be given some options. So so first of all, name your report. Don't displease the kitty. And this is where you can, so when I say you can then overlay the templates, this is where you can do it once you've selected a blank template. So select blank, and then once you've decided how you want that to be presented, you can then choose the technique, Google call it. It's basically one of the templates. So yes, again, just underlining the fact, I suggest starting with a blank and working from there. It gives you the most flexibility. Some of the things that aren't particularly well signposted with the Explore tab is the way it works. So it's really important to understand a few concepts. So the first one is you need to import dimensions and metrics into these custom visualizations. Now, the reason for that is GA4 allows you to have multiple tabs within a single report. So you might not want to have all of your dimensions and metrics in every single visualization. You may want to use some in one tab and some in another. So what's important to do is import the dimensions and metrics that you need to use for your report before you then apply them to a chart or a table. So this is done using the variables section. So if you click on the plus buttons, what you will find is a drop down of all the options. I will run you through an example shortly, but I would say there's a lot of choice here. There are a lot of things to choose from. So I would highly recommend using the search bar. It's a dynamic search bar. It's really useful to find, really drill down quickly to the dimensions and metrics that you're after. So once you, if you click on one of the drop downs, you'll have a selection of what's there, and then you can select what you want and then click import to import them into the report. Again, I'll show you an example of that shortly. Not all options are cross-compatible. So one of the big frustrations is, oh, I want to see this and I want to plot it against that, but that bit's grayed out. Why is it grayed out? The short reason is if Google could have everything at its most granular level and allow you to completely chart anything against anything, that's even a stretch for Google. Never mind, a sort of personal computer or a server. So unfortunately, it is just a function of the way that Google aggregates certain data. Certain data just can't be split out in as granular format as you would like. So if you do see those options grayed out, it's just that those two don't work well together. We can't, the data isn't at the same granular level, unfortunately. And then once you've imported all the dimensions and metrics, you then populate your visualization. You can either click on the rows and columns and values, and it will show you which of the imported dimensions and metrics you can use in those particular places. Again, show you an example in a second. So there's a lot of kind of settings as well within this. I'll just run you through what some of those mean. The technique, again, it's that overlaid predefined template. It won't, once you've selected it, it won't pre-populate anything. It will just reorganize your data into the visualization that you want. Then you have your visualization options, so whether it's a table or a chart or a pie chart or whatever that might be. Segment comparisons, these are your audience segments. So these will be segments that you've set up within your GA4 account to segment your own audience. That might be over how long they've been a customer or certain demographic groupings and so on. Rows, so that's usually dimensions. Row options, so you can either start, say, a table at a different row, or you can show, up from, I think it's, you can show one row if you want to, but up to about 250 rows if you have lots of rows in your table. And then the columns, very much the same. It's where you populate the, if you want to have columns as well as rows in your tables. Values, this is where you will put your metrics usually. And cell types, so there are certain within the table, for example. Again, I'll show you an example. There are certain ways to visualize that. And then filters. So if you wanted to filter certain data out of your data set, you can do it in the filters section. Again, uses normal logic. So here's a very, very simple example. We're looking at age and gender plotted against key events and sessions. So this is what the sort of output will be. In this case, I haven't nested gender under age. So you have a separate line for every conceivable combination. If you nest them, then you will have one age group and then split out male, female, then the next age group, male, female, and so on. The little plus button is where you can add a new tab. So before, when I was saying you can have multiple tabs within a single report, that's where you would add a new tab. Also highly recommend renaming where it says freeform 1. That's the tab name. You can rename that to whatever makes sense to what the visualization is. There's some control buttons. Again, undo and redo, I'm sure you're all perfectly familiar with. Export data, that actually isn't export data. The naming isn't particularly constant throughout, unfortunately, but that's where you can export data to Excel, Google Sheets, and so on. And then you can share your report as well. And that is very much sharing to people who have access to the property. So I'm going to run you through an example of building one of these now, and it answers a couple of questions we had around displaying website conversion rates and average order values in GA4, and how to create custom reports for specific pages. So we're on our home tab here. So we hit explore and then blank exploration. And we're going to rename the exploration. Badly, it seems. Then we're going to change the date range. I picked 90 days here. It's quite arbitrary, but it's a good range of data to look at. This is where we start to import our dimensions and metrics. So I'm going to use the search bar to look for first user campaign. So that's the brand new users, what campaign they came through to visit your site, and import. And then metrics. we're going to look at some search for conversion metrics, purchase conversion rate. And I should note that this isn't a default metric within GA4. You have to set that up as a custom metric. It goes slightly beyond the focus of this session, but we can certainly walk you through how to set it up. It's actually quite straightforward. And then we're going to look at average purchase revenue, which is sort of akin to average order value. So now we've imported those, but they haven't been applied to our visualization yet. So this is what we do now. Clicking on rows, we apply our dimension, and then the values, our purchase conversion rate, and our average purchase value of revenue. So then we can see our campaigns. And now I'm going to use heat map. I think that's a nice way to see the high points and low points. And then by clicking on the header of one of the columns, you can sort by that column. So we're sorted now by average purchase revenue, and we can see which of our campaigns perform the best in terms of average purchase revenue. And we're going to rename our tab, best practice. So that's campaign performance. So that's our first example. Now we're going to move on to a second example using a second tab. So I'm going to create a new tab, and we're going to look at page performance in this case. And we're going to start to import some new dimensions and metrics. You don't have to use every dimension or metric in every visualization. And I'm going to look at, I've chosen page title and screen name. Screen name is only really relevant if you've got a web app, if you've got a mobile app. I could have just used page title, but I chose page title and screen name in this case. And I'm going to look at page-related metrics. So page-related metrics might be things like sessions. And engagement. So I'm going to look at engagement rate. Session key event rates, that's the number of key events per session. And you notice I'm not importing these at one at a time. You can just keep selecting them and then import them all at once. And we'll look at average session duration as well. And once again, we're going to start populating the visualization by clicking on the rows, and you'll see the drop down of all the available dimensions that we have, the page title, and then in the values, sessions, engagement rate, and you can see on the right-hand side, it'll start to populate our table. Once again, I'm going to use the heat map, quickly see the high points and low points, and then I'm going to, so at the moment we're sorted by sessions, and obviously we're going to have a lot more than 10 pages on our website, so I've chosen the top 100 pages there, and we're sorted by sessions. So moving quickly on to the advertising section, this is if you have your Google Ads account linked to your GA4 account, if you have both, highly recommend you do. We can start to look at things like how Google is crediting each channel with your purchases or key events. Advertising segments, so where can you reach the audiences that you've defined in GA4? It can help you with some planning, sort of data that best helps you decide where to focus your ads, and conversion performance. So the data that comes out of Google Ads, you can see that in GA4 as well. One of the really interesting ones is path to conversion. So this was a report that wasn't initially available, unfortunately, within GA4, and they have now brought it in. We actually have a proprietary tool in-house that takes that data, because it's not very easy to manipulate once you've got the report, and it spits out report charts for you, so it will show you things like channel crossovers, so which channels commonly appear in an attribution path, which channels appear at the beginning of a purchase journey, which appear at the end, which tend to appear in the middle, how many do they tend to be in a purchase journey, for example. So that is a tool we have available. So do contact us if you're interested in understanding more about your path to conversion. I'll quickly go over a couple of visualization options. First one a lot of people use is exporting to Google Sheets, and then they'll do visualizations within Google Sheets or within Excel. You can pull the data directly into a Looker Studio dashboard, which I highly recommend you do. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And finally, you can visualize it in GA4. You can have the reports in your Explore section, or take screenshots for PowerPoint presentation, for example. Less recommended on that one, but those are 3 commonly used things. So in order to use Looker Studio, I'll just quickly show you how to connect your GA4 data to Looker Studio. So when you go into Looker Studio, you're asked to add data. So you click on Google Analytics, then you can find your Google Analytics property and then click Add. And then you'll suddenly see, once you click Add to Report, every dimension and metric within GA4 that you can map on the right-hand side there. So it gives you so much flexibility on how you visualize things. So I think we're going to do a very quick example here, looking at first user campaigns. I think I'm just going to copy one of the ones that I did earlier, but just show you how that would work in Looker. So you can drag that directly into the Looker dashboard. Anything green tends to be dimensions, anything blue tends to be metrics. That is common across all Google platforms. And I'm just adding average purchase conversion in there, just as an example to show you what that would look like. And then there's lots of ways you can make that look far prettier. So just some general tips to finish off. So always think about the question before you start diving into the data. Okay, clear in your mind what it is that you want to see, and what data will help you answer the question. Really good idea to sketch out a data schema, what you want it to look like in the end, whether it's a chart or a table. Examine past explorations to make sure someone hasn't already done the work that you're about to do. That's where the naming conventions come in really handy. And above all, play around with it. The more you use it, the more you play around with it, the more comfortable you'll become with it. And just as some further reading, GA4 Spy, if you search for GA4 Spy, it gives you a GA4 definitions Bible. So it will show you what every dimension and metric and parameter means. So really, really good. Have that, bookmark that, and refer to it. And I think wrap up, slightly overrun, but Q&A.
No, you are perfect, Ed. That was brilliant. I felt like I learned a lot, and I hope everyone at home did as well. From a question perspective, or if you've got any live questions, you can pop them in now. We've got about 5 minutes or so of Q&A that we're going to do, but I'm going to start with ones that came in ahead of today. So Irene from Nido. Hi, Irene, if you're there. So she's asked the question, why do I see a big discrepancy between the ads results in different platforms? So for example, Spotify, and then what's actually shown in analytics in terms of clicks? A really common question.
Very common question. Spotify, Facebook, you'll find that that differs a lot. Essentially, it's the rules and ways that they measure these different metrics, essentially. So you'll have different time frames. For example, Facebook are very, very lenient. They obviously want to incentivize you to spend money on their platform, as do Spotify and so on. So they want to make their data look as good as it does. So they're very lenient on things like look back windows. So it might be a 30-day look back window where GA4 might be 7 days, for example. Cookie policies is obviously a big one. Whether you're using third-party cookies or first-party cookies, that will result in a difference in things like clicks, because there'll be just a different visibility on the user, essentially. Attribution windows, as I said, and filters. The way that different platforms filter out duplicate clicks and invalid clicks is very different. What you'll find is Google Analytics is, again, probably a lot tighter on that kind of thing than than the platforms are, because again, they want to incentivize you to spend money on their platform essentially. So they're going to try to make their platform look as effective as possible. So the bottom line of it is, if you're looking at organic traffic versus paid traffic, use GA4 data, because you're looking at kind of a level playing field rather than trying to work in platform data to your GA4 data.
And I guess it's just managing those expectations internally, isn't it? Having a source of truth that you've all agreed this is where we get the data from. Because, yeah, as you say, it's such a, I've heard that question many a time over the years, not even just with GA4, it was the same with Universal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lisa at Travelopia. Hi, Lisa. I hope you're well. So she's asked a question around, we're often faced with mistrust when we've got new tools like this. So actually, we don't really trust the data ourselves. We've tried to kind of do the education piece internally. But are there any other tips on what we can do? Because actually, when we're trying to compare year on year, you're not able to, you're not looking at an apple and apple, you're looking at an apple and a pear. So how do you handle that?
Yeah. Lisa, we all feel you, I promise. Yeah, it's a tricky one. So unfortunately, now we are past the point where Google have actually started to completely close down Universal Analytics reports. So that data is no longer available. This is why it was so important to download that data before you lost it. And there was a lot of kind of warnings every time you logged into GA4 to prompt you to do that. So if you have that data, my recommendation would be, if you're looking to do sort of a year-on-year comparison, for example, obviously session-based data and event-based data is going to be completely different. There is no getting away from that. There is no fixing it. It is kind of what it is. So what I would recommend doing, what I've done in the past with clients, is try to establish some sort of adjustment coefficient. So if you know that roughly year on year, the traffic will be higher in September, lower in winter, perhaps, for example, compare those Septembers from your UA data to your GA4 data and sort of calculate like an adjustment. So is it consistently up or down by X%? And then you can apply that adjustment to any comparison you do. I would recommend applying that adjustment down for your UA data, because obviously the GA4 data is the current, it is what's going to happen in the future. So rather than having to continually adjust your GA4 data up, we need to adjust the UA data down, and it's just about recalibrating your expectations. It's a little bit like if we suddenly decided we were going to go from Celsius to Fahrenheit. It would take a while for a lot of people to kind of, well, is 80 degrees shorts weather, or do I need a coat? It's that kind of shift in understanding what the levels are. Where is the truth? Really good question. Google's a black box. It doesn't let on a lot about how it calculates these things, unfortunately. Wish it did. But yeah, just be completely transparent with stakeholders that that you're using these adjustments. It's kind of the best way if you need to to compare UA data to GA4 data. Obviously, eventually we'll get to the point where we have multiple years of GA4 data, and then that will be more easily comparable. You'll be comparing apples to apples in that sense. So yes, I think that's probably the best practice.
Good answer, made sense. We've had a live question in from Lucy at Roehampton University. Hi, Lucy. So she's asked, what's the main difference between reporting in GA via custom reports and building it in Looker Dashboard?
Looker Dashboard. Okay, so GA4. So if you want to, you can largely do most of the same stuff in terms of the visualizations that you're most likely going to need. The issue with the Explore tab in GA4 is anyone who looks at it needs to have access to your GA4, whether that's a reporting access only or admin access. The advantage of Looker Dashboard is it's kind of a standalone thing, so you can give anybody access to that, and they only have access to that single report. And no edited access, but they can still change things. Looker Dashboard Studios are dynamic, so they are updating in real time, so you don't need to continually manually pull data. And you can also have things like parameters and filters and drop downs, so that people who are looking at the report can change what they're seeing in each of the tables and charts. So if you are doing regular reports, highly recommend Looker Studio. It is more flexible. You can create custom metrics and calculations and things. It's just generally a lot more powerful in terms of what it allows you to do, and it doesn't require that access to your GA4 account. So for external people, for example, it's just a safer bet. So I believe we will be having a session upcoming on Looker dashboards, so watch out for that. Yes, that's kind of the main difference there.
Amazing. So I'm going to do two final questions that are relatively short, we'll see. So we've got Casey from Brim Meadows Golf Spa. Hi, Casey. How often should we be pulling updated reports from GA4 to identify trends?
How long is a piece of string? So it depends on the trends you're looking at. I would so the reports that are in GA4, if you're actually pulling data out to go into an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, for example, I would say weekly is a pretty good sweet spot. You can do it daily. That is a bit more sort of time, bit more of a time sink. Really and truthfully, so it's about the number of data points, I suppose. So if you're pulling daily data, if you pull it on a weekly basis, I think that's quite a nice sweet spot. Because basically, what you wanted to see is trends, but trends with enough data points to be certain that it's a trend and not just a blip. So I would say weekly would be a good sweet spot.
Love that. And then last one that we've got time for, but as I say, we will get answers to you all on all of these questions because there's some really great ones. But this is from Beth at Inside Travel Group. Hi, Beth. What's the single most important thing to know about GA4? And you've got like 30 seconds
Big
to
question.
answer it.
It's not out to hurt you, honestly. It's event focused, so just the understanding that it is measuring things in a different way from Universal Analytics did. I understand everyone loved Universal Analytics. I did too. We have to sort of let go now and embrace the future. So yeah, it's just understanding that it's measuring things differently. You're not going to get exact lineups of data between the two different platforms.
Perfect. Ed, great answer. And I think just the amount of questions we've had in ahead of today, questions rolling in while we've been in the session, it is such an important area. And I think some of what Ed's shown us today is how to find certain things. But when you found it, what do you do with it? How do you tell stories from it? How do you give the right information to people internally? How do you use it to make business cases, that type of thing? So we kind of put our heads together because there feels like there's a bigger need that's more than we can answer in a session like this. And magically, we've had Lottie join us on set here, which is fantastic. And Lottie's just going to tell us a little bit about a program that we're about to launch. So Lottie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about our launching of our performance and tracking training program. The reason we decided to go down the route of offering a program, as Becky sort of alluded to, is there are so many different opportunities for us to help clients understand how to acquire the data, how to read the data that they've got, and how to present that data back internally as well. So the program itself will cover a variety of different topics, which we're hoping that you will help us decide which one of those to prioritise. But some of the topics we've been thinking about, Ed has already started to cover a couple of those already in the session today. We'll go into a much more sort of detail and more granular focus, and also have the opportunity to look at your own GA4 accounts as well, to help you really understand kind of what's going on there and make sure that you're comfortable. The sorts of topics will include things like potentially sort of more deep dive into the other reporting opportunities within GA4, because we know there are so much data in there, and like there are so many opportunities to acquire different types of views and ways to manipulate the data, which we can help cover in those sessions and help you unearth from your own data, as well as like Looker Studio, which obviously Ed already touched on as well, how to visualize that data, how to provide a really accessible and informative ways of visualizing that data from GA4, and that's not only accessible for yourself but for other people in your business. One of his favorite topics of narrative and sort of storytelling with data as well. So once we've got all that data from GA4, how do we make it something that's really exciting, inspiring and engaging for yourself and also for people within the business, so that you can really get the most out of that analysis and understand how to push your business forward? The session, it'll be 6 sessions over a 12-week period. And as you said, those sessions will largely be defined based on the feedback that we get. But what's really important is that within those sessions, we'll also have Slack groups for you to be able to speak to each other during the gaps between the sessions. Also have access to people like myself, Ed and Matt also in the team, which will give you that support network to help understand any of the questions you might have during that time, but also just to help that motivation and that accountability between sessions, just to help ensure that some of those things that have been talked about in those sessions are then actioned, or that there's movement on those points, because we know how difficult it can be when you've got so much going on, to make sure that you're kind of keeping the momentum going on maybe some of those areas that feel a little bit more challenging.
Definitely. So small groups?
Yeah, small groups, about 10 people in the groups. So not too big, which I think is a really nice size to just give people the opportunity to feel that they can share what's going on. And also it gives us a chance to kind of get around the room as well, to make sure that everyone gets a voice and we can cover as much. So really, really useful insights specifically to their challenges rather than it being too generalized.
Perfect. So if I come along, you're going to hold me to account. I'm going to actually make a change. I'm going to be better at reporting in my business. I'm going to get some personalized recommendation. I mean, it sounds great. So this is something that's launching soon, but we wanted your feedback. So in general, we always ask you for your feedback because we want to know how these sessions work. So Erin is about to pop into the chat for us the link to our feedback form. So on the feedback form, it's our standard questions to hear how much hopefully you enjoyed Ed's session today. But there's also 2 extra questions on there of one, would you like to go on our wait list for this? Now, this will be a paid for training course. It's going to be priced at $899, but if you get your name on the wait list and if you want to take that up and actually book on, you'll get a special price of $749. So you'll get a discount there if you put your name on the wait list. The second question to this though is just topics, priorities. We just want to know from you so that we can really tailor the course content to what you're struggling with in your businesses at the moment or would like more support with. So we're going to give you 2 minutes now before we finish, and then I'm just going to do a final wrap up at the very end. So we're going to jump to the questionnaire and we'll be back with you in 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback. That really will help us make a difference and make sure we run the best sessions for you in the future. And we'll be in touch if you've put your name down for the wait list. And in case any of you were wondering, it's virtual, those sessions, virtual. So you won't need to get to sunny Kent. Right. Next week, we're here again. We're actually here with Lab next week, and we are talking about replatforming and migrations, which is a big topic. So there is still time to get your name down, and I think there might even still be some brunch boxes, but you'd need to be quick. So links in the comments. QR codes on screen. If you want to get your name down, we'd love to see you there. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. We will follow up with you. We will send you the recording from today, the slides from today, and answers to your questions if you submitted them. So thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you again soon.